The night my family made me invisible, I was standing in the corner of my daughter's living room, holding a tray of sweet potato squares I had spent all morning making, and not one person in that room turned to look at me. Christmas lights blinked gold above the fireplace, jazz in the air, laughter everywhere. My late husband's favorite album, playing through speakers he never got to hear. Not one person called my name. So I set the tray down, put on my coat, walked out into the cold Atlanta rain. Nobody noticed. Nobody came after me. Nobody even looked up. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just leaving a Christmas party. I was leaving their lives, and I was never coming back. If you have ever cooked for people who forgot you were there, drop a comment right now. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now let me tell you what happened that night and what I did about it. My name is Gloria Hayes, 68 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if you loved people hard enough and showed up faithfully enough, they would never forget you were there. David passed 5 years ago, and when he left, something in that family shifted, slowly, quietly, in ways I kept telling myself were just grief, just time, just adjustment. The hardest part wasn't the grief itself. It was learning to be strong alone, in a community that expected you to be strong, that looked at a Black woman of a certain age who had raised her children and buried her husband and simply assumed she was fine, that she didn't need, that she could carry whatever was handed to her next without complaint. I carried it, every bit of it, without complaint. I still cooked every holiday, still pulled out David's recipe card, his handwriting, blue ink, slightly smudged on sweet potato because he'd written it right after washing the dishes. I touched that card every time, not out of habit, out of something I couldn't name and didn't need to. The morning of December 23rd, I was up before 6. Yellow kitchen light, coffee with 1 sugar and real cream. I stood at the mirror to fix my earrings, the gold ones David gave me for our 20th, and I saw it. That smile. The tired one. The one I'd gotten so good at wearing that I almost didn't recognize it as tired anymore. I packed the squares anyway, put on my good dress, and told myself tonight would be different. Then the phone rang. Keisha. 42 seconds, I checked later. Mama, just confirm you're bringing the sweet potato squares. And please, not the coconut cake. Last year it just sat there. Gone before I could say anything else. My Keisha. Vice President of Operations. $320 hair appointments. The little girl I used to braid every Sunday morning before church while she complained I was taking too long. I told myself she was busy. I told myself busy wasn't the same as distant. I told myself a lot of things that year. I got in the car and drove to Buckhead, and what was waiting for me inside that house on Habersham Road, I was not prepared for any of it. When someone you love makes you feel invisible, do you speak up or do you go quiet and keep the peace? Drop your answer below, because where this story goes next, you will not see coming. Let me take you back a few hours, before I walked out that door. I'd woken up that Wednesday morning in my house on Fayetteville Road in Decatur. Same house David and I bought in 1987. Same house where we raised both kids. Same back porch where the boards still creak in the same spot they have since the first Bush administration, and I stopped trying to fix it a long time ago, because some things are meant to stay exactly as they are. Up before 6. The kitchen light was the old warm yellow kind, incandescent, the bulb I refused to swap for LED, no matter what Jamal said about energy bills. Coffee, 1 sugar, real cream. Then I opened the recipe box on the counter and pulled out the card. David's handwriting. Neat block letters, blue ink, slightly smudged on sweet potato because he'd written it right after washing the dishes. I touched that card every time I made this recipe. Every single time. Not habit, something else. Something I couldn't name and didn't need to. Keisha had called the week before. 42 seconds, I checked later. Mama, just confirm you're bringing the sweet potato squares? I've got a caterer for everything else. And please, not the coconut cake. Last year it just sat there. I said yes, baby. I'll bring the squares. She'd already hung up. I told myself she was busy. Always busy. VP of operations at a commercial real estate firm downtown, heels on marble, never a hair wrong. My Keisha. The same little girl I sat down every Sunday morning before church to braid, section by section, while she complained I was taking too long. Now she had a stylist named Dominique. $320 a session. I told myself busy wasn't the same as distant. Efficient wasn't the same as cold. I told myself a lot of things that year. I got to the house on Habersham Road at 5:30. Party started at 6. I came early to help. That was just who I was. But when Keisha opened the door, she kissed my cheek so fast it barely landed, pointed toward the kitchen, and kept moving. "There's a chair in the corner by the back counter, Mama. You'll have more room there." More room. My chair, the one at the head of the dining table, the one Keisha used to pull out for me with both hands every holiday when David was alive, had been replaced. Near the kitchen wall, half tucked behind the caterer's warming trays, sat a folding aluminum chair. Church picnic kind. I smoothed my skirt and sat down in it. I had worn my good dress. Long, wraparound, deep indigo and burnt orange, African print. Gold clip earrings David gave me for our 20th anniversary. I had wanted to look like a woman who belonged at this table. Malik didn't look up when I set my tray on the island. He was working the room near the bar cart, gold chain catching the light, shirt half rumpled, telling some story about a deal, hands going wide. Without breaking eye contact with his audience, he reached over and slid my tray sideways, making room for a platter of raw oysters on crushed ice. The tray scraped across the granite, almost went over the edge. I caught it with both hands. Nobody saw. I spent the next half hour near the hallway with a glass of sweet tea I didn't want, watching people I'd known for decades talk around me, through me, past me, the way you walk past furniture you've stopped noticing. Then I heard it. Malik's voice, low, on the other side of a coat closet door. "She's getting forgetful. Said the same story twice at Thanksgiving. We get one doctor to sign off, file the petition, and the Decatur house sells in 60 days. Easy money." Pause. Then Jamal, my son, 40 years old, the boy who used to climb into my lap after bad dreams and press his face against my shoulder and say, "Mama, you smell like home." "You think she'll fight it?" Malik laughed, not a kind laugh. "She's 68 and she cries watching Hallmark movies. What's she gonna do?" My heart didn't race. It stopped. Then started again, slow, like an engine turning over in the cold. 20 minutes later, Aaliyah found me by the folding chair. 14 years old, all arms and legs, bright yellow Atlanta hoodie, natural hair in a big puff. The best thing in that room. She had no idea. She hugged me, and I held on a beat too long. She pulled back and looked up with those wide open eyes. "Grandma, Mama said if I help clean out your extra room when we come over, she'll buy me an iPad." The way children say things. No cruelty, just plain truth with no wrapping on it. "She said your hands and feet have been slow, and you make the rooms messy." I smiled. "Is that so, baby?" "Are you okay, Grandma?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Go eat something." She bounced off toward the food table. I watched her go. What broke me wasn't the words. It was the innocence they came wrapped in. Aaliyah wasn't sent to wound me. She simply repeated what she'd been taught to believe. And Keisha, my daughter, had stopped thinking of me as someone who could be hurt. That's its own kind of cruelty, the kind that doesn't even know what it is. I slipped down the hallway to Keisha's home office, door open a few inches, laptop lit, screensaver not yet on. Top of the inbox in bold. Gloria Hayes, competency assessment, draft filing. Beside the keyboard, a manila folder with a printed label, Decatur property transfer, signature pending. The framed photo of David that used to hang above Keisha's desk was gone, just a lighter rectangle on the paint where it had been. I'd asked at Thanksgiving. She'd said, "That decor is a little dated now, Mama. I'm redesigning the whole wall." I walked back down the hallway, got my coat, went to the front door. But I had a call to make. And the person on the other end had been waiting 5 years for exactly this moment, even though I hadn't known it until right now. Because what I'd seen on that laptop was only the surface. What was underneath it was something far more calculated, and the person who'd protected me from it had done so before he ever left this world. 22 minutes back to Decatur. In the rain. I know every inch of that drive. South on Peachtree Road, east on Ponce de Leon, through Candler Park's lit-up storefronts, then into my neighborhood where the magnolias dripped and the streetlights made soft halos in the wet. 1,000 times that drive. But that night felt like the first time. Or maybe the last. My hands were steady on the wheel. That surprised me. I thought I might cry. Thought the drive home alone on Christmas Eve, rain on the glass, no David humming something tuneless in the passenger seat like he always did, might be the thing that finally broke me open. It wasn't. Something else was happening. A cold, slow settling. The way everything goes still when the temperature drops fast. I pulled into the driveway on Fayetteville Road and sat in the dark. Porch light on. I always left it on. The light caught the raindrops on the windshield and turned each one briefly gold. The house looked the way it always looked. Sturdy, old, mine. I checked my phone. Robert Whitfield, attorney at law. David's lawyer for 19 years. Mine for the 5 since. Message received at 7:43 while I was still standing in Keisha's hallway. Gloria. I know it's the holiday, but there are documents you need to see, tonight if possible. I'm at the office. I called him back. First ring. Come in, he said. I'll have coffee on. Robert's office was on Commerce Drive in Decatur, above a dry cleaner's in a building that had been there since the Carter years. Old paper smell, radiator heat. He was a thin, careful man in his early 70s. Wire-rimmed glasses, a voice trained by 4 decades of delivering hard news without letting it turn cruel. 2 folders on his desk when I sat down. He didn't waste time. Gloria, someone filed preliminary paperwork this week to initiate a legal competency proceeding against you. The claim is cognitive decline, and the evidence, hear me carefully, is audio recordings. Audio recordings. Your voice, edited, out of context. Several clips from when you were waking from sleep or mid-sentence, spliced together to suggest confusion. I thought about Aaliyah's iPad, about Jamal's 4 seconds of silence, about Malik's laugh. There's more, Robert said. Second folder, 2-page property transfer for the house on Fayetteville Road. Our house. David's in mine. Signature line at the bottom of page 2. My name. In blue ink. I never signed that document. Not once. I studied the signature. Close, practiced, patient. But the G was wrong. I've always closed my G's. Small, tight loop. David teased me about it for 30 years. Said it looked like a 3rd-grade schoolteacher's handwriting. I always said thank you. This G was open at the top. Beneath the transfer, a second document. David's life insurance. $500,000, still in the estate account. A petition attached, asserting I was mentally incompetent to manage assets. Requesting the court appoint a financial guardian. The proposed guardian's name was Malik Jerome Brooks. The radiator clicked. Rain on the window. Robert waited. His patience in that moment was one of the kindest things anyone had given me all year. Then the first tear came. 1. Straight down. Landed on the word David, part of the insurance header. I watched it spread into the paper and blur the letters of my husband's name. I gave myself 15 seconds, counted them, then I was done. I straightened up, looked at Robert across the desk. What do we do? Not a question. He almost smiled. Temporary injunction to freeze all estate accounts is already drawn up. I've retained a forensic document examiner, forgery confirmed within 48 hours. He slid a 3rd document across. I need your signature, the real one. My hand shook. I won't pretend it didn't. But I signed it. G closed all the way I'd always done it. Robert studied the page, then looked at me over his glasses. David came to see me 5 years ago, 3 weeks before he passed. He said, And I wrote this down because I knew I might need it. He said, "Robert, if my Gloria ever comes through that door with tears in her eyes over something one of our children did, you activate everything immediately. Don't wait for her to ask." I put my hand over my mouth. He knew, Robert said. Not when, not exactly how, but he knew that money and grief together can turn people into something they were never raised to be. He made sure you were protected before he left. I sat in that small office on Commerce Drive with rain on the window and the radiator clicking and Robert's terrible coffee going cold in my hand. And I thought about David, his reading glasses on the nightstand, his handwriting on the recipe card, his voice. "Gloria, you look like a school teacher in that coat, and I mean that in the best way." He had seen this coming. He had stood between me and it from the other side of death. I wiped my eyes, squared my shoulders. "All right," I said. "Let's make sure his instructions are followed to the letter." There is a shift that happens when a person stops absorbing and starts deciding. I'd taken blow after blow that night. The folding chair, the scraped tray, Aaliyah's innocent words, the forged signature, Malik's name on David's insurance. Each one landed. Each one hurt. But grief and shock, when they stack up all at once, eventually hit a threshold. And on the other side of that threshold isn't despair. It's a cold, clarifying fury that feels, strangely, like power. That's what I felt sitting across from Robert. Not rage, not panic, something still and sharp and completely certain. They had spent months building a version of me, forgetful, fragile, manageable. What they never considered was that the real Gloria Hayes had been watching the whole time. I drove home through the rain and slept, deeply, completely, first time in months. Because somewhere between the folding chair and the forged signature and Robert's quiet office and the image of David sitting across from a lawyer 3 weeks before he died to make sure I'd be okay, something inside me shifted for good. I'd walked into that Christmas party as someone's afterthought. I was waking up tomorrow as something else. They'd made one mistake. They assumed quiet meant defenseless. They had no idea what David had left behind. And they had no idea what they'd just woken up. They arrived at 9:17 on the morning of December 26th. I know because the kitchen clock, black, round, hung slightly crooked above the refrigerator since 1994, never once straightened because I liked it that way, read 9:17 when I heard the cars in the driveway. 2 of them. I had been expecting that. I was already seated, up since 5, showered, dressed carefully, the indigo and orange wrap dress again, African print, gold clip earrings, good china on the dining table, the ivory set with a thin gold rim that only came out for Thanksgiving and Easter, full pot of coffee, creamer, sugar bowl, 4 cups. And I sat at the head of the table, David's chair, the one I hadn't sat in since the week after his funeral, when I finally made myself walk back into that dining room without feeling like the floor might give. I'd stood behind it many times, rested my hands on the back of it, never sat down. I sat down now. It felt exactly like putting on something that had always been made for me. Robert was to my right, arrived at 8:30, briefcase, wire rims, that unhurried voice. To his right, Officer Denise Collins and her partner, both plain clothes, coffee in hand, completely comfortable. I heard Keisha's key in my front door lock. She still had a copy. I hadn't changed that yet. I was about to. The door opened. 4 people. Keisha first, gray wool coat, hair pressed and up, dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Jamal behind her, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor. Malik behind him, already talking before he cleared the doorway. Something about paperwork, a doctor's appointment, making this easy for everybody. Behind them, a man I didn't recognize. Late 40s, leather satchel. He introduced himself in the hallway as a psychological evaluator. They came into the dining room and stopped. I could read their faces. They had expected to find me in my housecoat, confused, fragile, already crumbling under the weight of what they'd put in motion. They found me at the head of my own table in my good dress, with a lawyer, 2 officers, and fresh coffee. Malik recovered first, set his jaw. Gloria, we're just here to make sure you're all right. This isn't adversarial. Sit down, Malik. He blinked. All of you, sit down. They sat. The evaluator looked between Robert and the officers and quietly lowered himself into the last chair, setting his satchel on the floor. Robert reached into his briefcase, pulled out a small digital recorder, set it in the center of the table, pressed play. The recording was from Malik's car, night of December 23rd, driving home from Habersham Road. He used the car's system for business calls, a habit he hadn't thought to turn off. What came through that recorder was clean and clear in the quiet of my dining room. Malik's voice. She cries watching Hallmark movies. What's she gonna do? 4 seconds of silence. Jamal. Just make sure the paperwork is tight. The evaluator stood so fast his chair scraped back across the hardwood, said something about being misinformed regarding the nature of this visit, picked up his satchel, walked out. We heard his car start, back out, drive away. Malik's face had gone the gray of a man who just felt the ground go soft beneath him. Keisha had both hands over her mouth. Jamal stared at the center of the table. I let the silence sit. The clock ticked. Rain again outside, soft and steady against the kitchen window. Then Keisha looked up, eyes red, wet. Dad always chose you first. Every time. Always you. Never us. Voice broke on the last word. Before I could respond, small footsteps in the hallway. Aaliyah came through the doorway in her yellow Atlanta hoodie, holding a white envelope in both hands. Careful, the way you carry something you've been trusted with. She came straight to me and set it on the table, then turned and looked at her mother with those steady eyes. Grandpa left a letter, Mama. Mr. Robert gave it to me this morning. He said Grandma would want me to be the one to bring it. Keisha went still. Aaliyah opened the envelope, unfolded the page inside, and read it in a clear, unhurried voice. 14 years old, steady as a grown woman. To my children, I love you both. But love without integrity is just need dressed up in a Sunday suit. Your mother sacrificed things you will never fully know the shape of, and she did it without asking for credit or recognition. If you are reading this in difficult circumstances, it means you have forgotten that. I hope you remember before it is too late to repair what matters. The room was completely quiet. I looked at my daughter's face, my son's face, Malik, very still, staring at a fixed point on the tablecloth. I slid the manila folder to the center of the table. 5 years ago, I said, David and I established an irrevocable trust. Every asset, this house, the estate account, the insurance policy, every piece of it is held in that trust, managed solely by me. There is nothing to petition, nothing to transfer, nothing to take, because it was protected before David ever left. I looked at Malik directly. 68 years of looking away from confrontation to keep the peace. Not this morning. The lease on your Mercedes is financed through an LLC that is currently under legal review. And Keisha, I turned to my daughter and kept my voice level. The Georgia State Bar's Ethics Review Board will receive a formal complaint this Monday morning regarding the unauthorized use of a family member's identifying information in a third-party legal filing. That complaint was drafted yesterday afternoon. Keisha made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Malik pushed back from the table. Now hold on. I am not finished. Something in my voice, not loud, not sharp, just final, stopped him cold. I chose you both as my whole world for 40 years. I cooked, I stayed, I kept quiet. I made myself smaller so there would be more room for the people I loved. I don't regret that. But the woman who sat in the folding chair and caught her own tray before it fell and said nothing, she is not coming back. I stood up from David's chair. I'm asking you to leave my house. Not because I hate you. I need you to understand that. But because I love myself enough not to allow this to continue. Jamal put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once. Malik stood and walked out without a word and without looking at anyone. Keisha stood for a long moment with that raw look on her face. Something young and broken that reminded me, despite everything, of a little girl sitting still on a Sunday morning while I braided her hair and she pretended to be patient. Then she walked out. Jamal followed, head down, silent. Aaliyah stayed. She crossed the room and wrapped both arms around my waist and pressed her face against my shoulder and held on. I rested my hand on the back of her head, closed my eyes. The engine started outside, cars backing down Fayetteville Road, fading into the gray December morning. Then the quiet, rain-washed, settled, mine, and my granddaughter's arms around me, and the kitchen clock ticking, and the porch board giving one familiar creak somewhere in the wind. What happened in that dining room wasn't just a confrontation. It was the end of a story that had been building inside each person there for years. Keisha wasn't simply villainous. She was a woman who'd spent her whole life feeling like runner-up in her own family, and grief had cracked that wound all the way open. Malik had spotted it and built a plan around it, because that's what manipulators do. They don't create the fracture. They find the one already there and press it, slowly, patiently, until it's useful. Jamal had followed along because following was easier than standing. And in that dining room, he felt the full weight of that choice for the first time. Keisha's words, "Dad always chose you first," weren't just greed talking. They were a child's unhealed pain, worn so long it had turned into permission to do something unforgivable. Understanding why someone hurts you doesn't mean excusing it, but it means you can put it down without carrying it the rest of your life. The table was finally set right, and I knew, standing there with my granddaughter holding on, exactly what came next. I gave myself 1 week. 1 week in the house on Fayetteville Road after everything, to sit with the quiet, let each room be what it was, have a few more mornings with that crooked clock and that yellow kitchen light, and the porch board creaking in the wind. I owed myself at least that. I baked. I know that sounds small. It wasn't. I made David's sweet potato squares with no party to bring them to, no reason except wanting to fill that house with the smell one more time. Stood in that kitchen in my housecoat at 7 in the morning, with Nat King Cole on the radio and the oven warming up and the whole house smelling like brown sugar and butter and something close to peace. I cried a little, not the desperate kind, the kind that comes when something is genuinely over and you finally have enough quiet to feel it properly. Then I made the coconut cake, the one Keisha had dismissed, the one that sat untouched last year, and I carried it down the street to Miss Patricia on Belmont Avenue. 81 years old, widowed twice, and she received it at the door with both hands and actual tears in her eyes. "Gloria Hayes," she said, "you are the only person in this zip code who still makes a real coconut cake." I told her to enjoy every single slice. That week, I walked through every room in the house on Fayetteville Road, and I let myself look at things properly. Not the way you look at things when you're always in motion, always cooking or cleaning or preparing for someone else. Really look. The slightly crooked clock above the refrigerator, the mark on the hallway wall where Jamal had backed his bicycle into the plaster when he was 11, and David had never quite gotten around to patching it. The kitchen windowsill where I kept 3 small plants that had no business still being alive after everything they'd been through, a little brown at the edges, leaning hard toward the light, but alive. I thought about what it means to tend something faithfully for years, to water it even when you're tired, to move it toward the window without being asked. I had done that for this family my whole life, and I was still alive. Brown at the edges maybe, leaning toward the light, but alive. By the 2nd week of January, I had made my decision. Charlotte, North Carolina. My cousin Evelyn had been asking me to come for years. Good churches, new neighborhoods, women our age starting over without apology. Room there, light there, a life that had nothing to do with who I'd been in relation to everyone else. I called Robert, started the process of updating my primary residence in the trust documents, called a property manager about renting the Fayetteville Road house to a young family who needed the space and would take care of the yard. Not selling, not yet, just distance, the kind you need to step back before you can see something clearly. Packing was harder than I expected, not because I had so much, because every object in that house had a story attached to it, and deciding what to bring meant deciding which stories were coming with me and which ones I was leaving in the walls. I brought the clock, the recipe box, the 3 plants from the kitchen windowsill, a quilt my mother made in 1971 that had been folded at the foot of the bed so long it had creased into itself permanently. David's reading glasses. I don't know why, I just couldn't leave them. I left the photograph albums in the hallway closet. Not forever, just for now. There are things you can look at clearly, and things you need a little more time and distance before you can face them straight on. I stood at the front door on the morning I left and looked back at the house one more time. 37 years of living in those walls. Children's voices, holiday dinners, the sound of David's key in the lock every evening. All of it's still in there somehow, the way a smell stays in a room long after the source of it is gone. "All right," I said out loud to nobody, or maybe to David. "All right," and I got in the car. I drove to Charlotte on a Saturday in late January. Good dishes wrapped in dish towels in the back seat, 3 houseplants on the passenger floor that I absolutely was not leaving behind. Nat King Cole again on the radio, because some things you just keep doing. The house I rented was on Seneca Place in the Optimist Park neighborhood. Small craftsman bungalow, pale yellow siding, porch with a wooden swing, backyard with one large pecan tree dropping its last leaves as I arrived, like it had been waiting to start fresh alongside me. I tested the porch swing that first afternoon. Good working order. I sat on it for a long time and watched the pecan tree and listened to the neighborhood settle into evening. A dog somewhere, a child's voice, a screen door. The ordinary sounds of people living their lives. I had forgotten how good ordinary sounded. Calvary Baptist Church on Beatties Ford Road within the first month. Not because anyone asked, because I wanted to. Because I had spent too many years doing things out of obligation and not nearly enough doing things because they were good for my soul. At Calvary, I met Sister Dorothy, 71, sharp eyes, easy laugh. She organized a weekly cooking class for widowed and single women in the congregation, found me after my second Sunday. "I've heard you make a sweet potato square that changes people's lives. That true?" I said I couldn't speak to changing lives, but they'd never left a tray yet. She laughed from somewhere low in her chest. "Then you're teaching next Thursday. I'll set up the kitchen." Just like that, I had somewhere to be on Thursday mornings. The class grew. 6 women around a fold-out table became 14, then 20. Every week, cooking and talking and telling each other the truth about their lives over the sounds of something good on the stove. We called ourselves the Thursday Table. We meant it both ways. David's sweet potato squares, my mother's cast-iron cornbread, no sugar, not from a box. A whole roasted chicken with herbs and garlic that could feed 4 people well, or 1 woman very happily for 3 days straight. And while we cooked, we talked. About the loneliness nobody warned you was coming. About children who meant well and children who didn't. About losing a husband and then discovering that the family you thought was solid had cracks running through it you'd been too busy to see. About money and dignity and the strange, clean freedom of being old enough to stop pretending. I didn't share my full story in those early weeks. I just listened. But what I heard around that table was myself, in different voices, different losses, different shapes of the same patient endurance. There was a woman named Cecile, 63, who hadn't left her son's house in 4 years because he told her she needed looking after. She came to class in clothes that were slightly too big, the way people dress when they've been told for long enough that they don't quite take up real space. By the 3rd week, she showed up in a yellow blouse. Just a yellow blouse. But she stood different in it. Taller somehow. I recognize that. The exact moment a woman remembers she has a right to color. There was Ruth, 70, who hadn't cooked for herself in 2 years because, she said, it didn't seem worth the effort for just one person. The first time she made cornbread in my class and ate a piece standing right there at the counter, still warm from the skillet, she got very quiet. Then she said, "I forgot food could taste like something." I thought about all the meals I had made over the years for people who barely looked at the plate. And I thought about Ruth, standing at that counter with a piece of cornbread, tasting something. That is why I cook. That has always been why. Sacrifice is a gift, but a gift given without limit, without any ability to ever say, "This is enough now." That's not love anymore. That's erosion. You can love someone completely and still refuse to let them wear you down to nothing. The women at that Thursday table had all learned their own version of this, each in her own painful way. What they were learning now, together, was what comes after, what you build in the space that the erosion left behind. Aaliyah came to visit in March, took the bus from Atlanta alone, 14 years old, backpack, earbuds, a self-possession that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. She showed up at my door on a Saturday morning and handed me a photo album she'd made herself. Printed photographs in clear plastic sleeves, in order. Me and Aaliyah at the Atlanta Zoo when she was 4. David and me at a neighborhood cookout the summer before he got sick. Aaliyah's first birthday. Me holding her in the hospital, gold earrings already in, same ones I wore the night of the Christmas party. "I wanted you to have these," she said, "in case you were lonely." We sat on the porch swing and went through every page. She pointed at a photo of David laughing at something off camera, mouth open wide, eyes completely gone. "He looks so happy," she said. "He was," I said. "He really was." She leaned her head against my shoulder. We stayed like that for a while, the swing moving slow, the pecan tree doing its quiet thing in the yard. That was the first afternoon in Charlotte that felt genuinely like home. In April, a text from Keisha. "Mama, I don't expect you to call right back. I just need you to know I'm in therapy now, real therapy, and I'm starting to understand things I should have understood a long time ago. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough on its own. I'm working on figuring out what enough looks like." I read it twice. Set the phone down, finished my coffee, watched the pecan tree in the backyard do what pecan trees do in April. Begin again, quietly, without announcement. I didn't call back that day, or the next. I sat with it the way I'd learned to sit with hard things, not pushing it away, not rushing toward it, just letting it be there until I knew what I actually felt about it, rather than what I was supposed to feel. What I felt eventually was this. My daughter was in pain. She had been in pain for a long time, and she had made choices inside that pain that I could not and would not excuse. But she was trying. And trying, even imperfect and late, is not nothing. I wrote back 3 days later, not from habit, not from guilt. "I hear you, Keisha. I forgive you." But forgiveness isn't the same as going back to how things were. You have work to do on yourself. Do it honestly. When you're truly ready, not just sorry, but ready, we'll talk. "I love you. That has never changed." I pressed send. Then I made a cup of tea and went out to the porch swing and sat in the late April afternoon and felt, not happiness exactly, something more solid than happiness. Integrity, my own. Finally intact. From Jamal, a handwritten card arrived in late April. His handwriting looks nothing like David's, but the effort of it, sitting down with a blank card and a pen and not knowing where to begin, meant something real. I haven't called him yet. I will, when I'm ready, on my own time. Malik. I left entirely to Robert and the legal process. His name appeared in several significant documents that year, none of them in his favor. I slept through every development without losing a night. I hung David's slightly crooked clock in the new kitchen on Seneca Place. Same nail, same angle, same tilt to the left. Looked exactly right. The 3 plants from the Fayetteville Road windowsill went on the new windowsill in Charlotte. Still a little brown at the edges, still leaning toward the light, still, somehow, alive. I stopped trying to fix that, too. The porch swing had a rust spot on the right arm I kept meaning to paint over. Never did. Some things are meant to stay exactly as they are. And the life I was building in Charlotte, imperfect, unhurried, genuinely mine, was starting to feel like something I'd been walking toward for a very long time without knowing the address. Nobody tells you about starting over at 68. Not the diminished, making-do version the world expects for a woman who's been through what I've been through. The real thing. Which is, if you let it be, the freest you have ever felt. I'm standing on the porch on Seneca Place, Saturday evening, late May. Charlotte sky doing what it does at dusk in spring. Gold first, then pale pink, then a deep settled blue at the edges. The pecan tree has fully leafed out. Down the block, someone's grill is getting started. The porch swing is creaking. The rust spot is still on the right arm. Sweet tea. No ice. Never liked it too cold. I'm smiling. Not the careful, managed smile from the house on Habersham Road. The one that said, "I'm fine, don't worry, everything is fine." Not the worn, thin smile I saw in that mirror on December 23rd, fixing my earrings before driving to a party where nobody would call my name. A real smile. From somewhere quiet, deep, earned. Some mornings I still wake up reaching for the other side of the bed. Not every morning, less than before. But sometimes, especially when the light comes through the bedroom curtains at that particular angle that David always called the good light, I'll be half awake and half somewhere else, and for just a second the world is still the one where he's downstairs making coffee too strong and humming something he doesn't know the words to. Then I'm awake, and the house on Seneca Place is quiet, in the way that only a house belonging to one person can be quiet. I used to lie there and let that feeling hollow me out. Now I get up, put the kettle on, open the back door so the pecan tree comes in with the morning, that particular green smell of leaves and damp soil that I have decided is one of the best smells in the world. I stand in my kitchen in my housecoat and I think, David, you would have loved this yard. And then I make my coffee and I get on with the day. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. There are women at the Thursday table who are in the early part of what I walked through. Women who are still in the house where everything hurts. Still cooking for people who don't look up. Still wearing the tired smile in the mirror and calling it fine. I watch them come in on Thursday mornings, a little stiff, a little armored, the way you carry yourself when you've been disappointed enough times that you've stopped expecting the room to be safe. And I watch what happens over the course of 2 hours of cooking and talking and laughing at Hattie burning her biscuits again. The armor comes down. Not all at once, just enough. That is what I try to give them. Not advice, not a lesson, just the evidence of my own life, standing right there in a kitchen apron, 68 years old, genuinely happy, as proof that the other side of this exists. It does. I promise you it does. Sister Dorothy pulled me aside after class last month. She said, "Gloria, you know what you are? You're a before and after that happened to the same woman." I thought about that for a long time. She's right. I am the before. The woman in the folding chair, catching her own tray, saying nothing, and I am the after. The woman on the porch in Charlotte, with sweet tea and a creaking swing and a rust spot she decided not to paint over. The same woman, same hands, same gold earrings David gave me for our 20th, just finally taking up the right amount of space. 3 weeks ago, the Thursday table had our biggest gathering yet. 26 women in the fellowship hall at Calvary, steam and talk and cornbread smell, and the beautiful chaos of too many good cooks in one kitchen. Hattie burned her first batch of biscuits and laughed at herself so freely the whole room laughed with her. I thought about the aluminum folding chair at the edge of Keisha's kitchen. I thought about the sweet potato tray nobody looked at. Then I looked around that room. 26 women passing dishes, sharing spoons, talking over each other with the ease of people who have decided to actually show up for each other. And I thought, this is the table I was supposed to be at all along. There's a truth that took me 68 years and one cold Christmas Eve to finally see clearly. We are taught, as women, as mothers, as women of a certain generation and a certain community, that love means endurance. That family means absorption. That being strong means never naming what it costs you. But there's a point where endurance without acknowledgement becomes something else. It becomes the quiet erasure of a person. And the cruelest part is how slowly it happens. So slowly that the woman being erased is usually the last one to name it. She's spent so long making sure everyone else was comfortable that her own discomfort became background noise she learned not to hear. I heard it on a Wednesday night in December, standing in a corner with a tray of sweet potato squares. And I am glad, deeply, genuinely glad that I finally did. Aaliyah is coming back in July, wants to learn the coconut cake. I told her I'd teach her everything: cake, sweet potato squares, cast iron cornbread, and we'd write each recipe down together on new index cards. Both are handwriting, so there would always be 2 copies in the world that carry what we know. She called me last week just to talk. No reason, just called. We were on the phone for 47 minutes. I checked because the last time I checked a call length, it was Keisha's 42 seconds, and I wanted to feel the difference between those 2 numbers. 47 minutes. About school, about a boy in her class she wasn't sure about whether she should cut her hair. Regular 14-year-old things. She asked me what I thought, and then actually waited for the answer. That is love. Plain and uncomplicated and freely given. I didn't know how hungry I was for it until it was sitting right in front of me. Evening is cooling on the porch now. Neighbor's grill hisses. From 3 blocks over, Calvary Baptist, I can just catch the end of Thursday choir rehearsal, something low and full and jubilant on the warm air. David would have liked this porch. Feet up on the railing, leaned back, he would have said, "Gloria, this one has good bones. This is a keeper." He was always right about houses. I think he would say the same about this life. This story reminds us that love, real love, the kind built over decades of showing up, cooking, sacrificing, staying, was never meant to be a license to take without asking, or to discard without consequence. The woman who carries a family on her back is not the family's convenience. She is its foundation. And when that foundation is finally allowed to leave the table where it was never truly seen, and find the table where it belongs, what grows there is not bitterness. What grows there is peace. Age does not reduce the value of a person. Widowhood does not make you expendable. Quiet does not mean defenseless. And it is never, ever too late to choose yourself. Sometimes leaving the wrong table is the only way to find your own. If this story touched something in you today, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And if there's a woman in your life who needed every word of this, share it with her. She'll know exactly why.